This is learning a block tomorrow. Today's daf is daf Ayin Dalid, and we will begin from the near the top of the page. So basically, the last thing we learned was we brought the view of Rabbi Yonason ben Shaul, who says that when we say if there's a pursuer, the pursuee or the intended victim has a right to defend himself and kill the pursuer, we're only talking about a case where there's no alternative. But if you can wound him and maim him, and rather than killing him, then that's what you should do. Now, what's the story? It says the Gemara, we are up to about 6 lines from the top of the page. My timer, de Rab Yonason ben Shaul. What is the logic of Rabbi Yonason ben Shaul? The Chsiv says a pasuk, "V'chiyinotzu anoshim." Reuven and Shimon are fighting it out, and Reuven intends to kill Shimon. And then instead, he struck a woman. So then the pasuk says it depends. If he kills the woman, obviously, then he will be punished. If he doesn't kill the woman, but he causes a miscarry, then he has to pay money. Now, remember, we have the concept here of kamle b'derabbaneh, which is that if you get the stricter punishment, you don't pay the lighter one. And we're talking about a roidif is considered kamle b'derabbaneh, because since the roidif deserves to be killed, so therefore he doesn't have to pay for barrels that he breaks, because kamle b'derabbaneh. So now says Rabbi Elazar follows. When it says over here, we're talking about, let's say, Reuben intended to kill Shimon. The Chsiv says because if it turns out to be that he actually kills this woman, he gets punished. So therefore we see that what you don't get punished unless you intended to kill. And yet, nevertheless, the Torah says the loy yasin. But if he doesn't end up killing the woman, then he needs to pay money. But since Reuven is a roidev, he's trying to kill Shimon, and we say kamle b'derabbaneh, so why is he paying money to this to the woman's family? L'chayda kamle b'derabbaneh. So there's only one possibility to learn that not every roidev is chayiv misa. When if the nirdif, if the intended victim can just wound him rather than killing him, so the roidev in that instance is not chayiv misa. And that's that's the proof of Rabbi Yonason ben Shaul that sometimes the nirdif has no right to kill him. If he can only wound him and save himself by doing that, then he has no right to kill him. And that's what Rabbi Yonason ben Shaul's conclusion is. If you say that if you can save yourself with one of by just wounding him, you have absolutely no right to kill the pursuer. If we find the others, you get punished. For example, so we're up to the last lines, the narrow lines of Ayin Dal and Aleph. So, for example, you can save yourself by just wounding that person. So then the roidif, the pursuer, is not chayiv misa. So there's no kameh b'derab, and he pays money. But Eliyam, if you're going to say that you're going to say that if you can save yourself from one of the limbs, then he doesn't get. He's nevertheless you're allowed to kill him, which means that the roidif is chayiv misa. Then why is he paying money? When do you ever find a case that he pays money? So therefore, that's the proof of Yonason ben Shaul. There is actually an argument whether anybody even argues of Yonason ben Shaul, because the Gemara always keeps on saying Yonason ben Shaul. So is there an opposing argument? What do they believe? But that's his basis for his proof. There is an interesting Mishnah Melech that quotes some Acharonim on the Rambam, and he says that this whole din, that if you're able to wound the pursuer, you have no right to kill him, is only talking about a third party. But the nirdif himself, who's so, he's so scared and confused, and he can't think straight. We cannot tax him with this law and say, hey, you can only defend yourself and not kill a person if you can avoid that. So then the question is, how would we learn this Gemara here, where it seems to be saying that the defendant himself has no right to kill him, and therefore there's kameh b'derabbaneh. How do we explain this Gemara over here? So some want to say that if the only person that has a right to kill the roidif is a defendant, but nobody else has a right to kill the person, then that is not called chayiv misa. Chayiv misa is that you're chayiv misa to everybody. But over here, you're saying that nobody else has a right to kill him because they can wound him. It's only the defendant who has a right to kill him, the intended victim. So in that case, it's not called chayiv misa, therefore there's no common rabbi. That's what Gemara is saying. Says the Gemara, lav dafka, no proof from here. Why not? Dil mashani hacha the misa tashlum zeh. Maybe this does not fall under the category of common rabbi, and the reason is here you are chayiv. Reuben intended to kill Shimon, so therefore he is chayiv misa to Shimon, and Shimon has a right to kill Reuben, and others have a right to protect Reuben and protect Shimon and kill Reuben. But the money is because he struck the woman and caused a miscarriage. So the money is for the woman. And if the money is for the woman, so this misa lazeh or mama lazeh, two different people are involved over here. There's no kamla b'drabin in this case. And the Gemara says, loishna. It actually doesn't make a difference whether it's to one person or to two people. And before we, I'll explain out in a minute what's going on here. Rava said, if, let's say, Reuben was chasing Shimon, so Reuben's a pursuer. And Reuben ended up breaking Kalim. Now remember, Reuben is chayiv misa now because he's a roidif. I don't care whose Kalim he broke, he's potter. My time is chayiv benafshihu, he deserves to be killed. Now, what happens if the nirdif, the intended victim, is running about to Shibboleth at Kalim while he's trying to save himself? He broke someone else's Kalim or someone's Kalim. So it depends. If he broke the pursuer's Kalim, of course he's potter. If you can, why? I will still explain in a minute. But if he broke other people's Kalim Chayim. So the potter, if you have a right to kill your pursuer, surely you can break his pots and pans to save yourself. So anybody else's Kalim were not involved in this whole story. Why? You are saving yourself with the money of your friend, and you're not allowed to do that. So therefore, you have to pay them. Now, this is actually a very odd halacha. We learned this in Hakainis in the early Samachs, where the Machlek is Rashi and Taisa, but it seems from Rashi there that even in the case of life and death, you're not allowed to save yourself with someone else's money. And which is very difficult to understand. That's what I seem to be saying here as well. Others say you are allowed to save yourself with other people's money, but you have to pay them back. They're not mechuyev to support you that way, and you have to reimburse them. So there's no isa. But Rashi seems to be doing there's an isa to save yourself. You're not allowed to. Very difficult Gemara to understand according to Rashi. Then the Gemara continues here. What happens? What happens? Reuben was the intended victim. Shimon was the pursuer. And then Levi was the third party pursuing Shimon to protect Reuben. So what happens? This person, like the Shibboleth broke Kalim, whose it is, he's always exempt. He's always exonerated. This third outsider who's trying to help Reuben is always an outsider. He's always potter. And why is that? Not according to Allah, but if you don't say that, why would anybody intervene? If I have to pay Mali you're gonna charge me because I broke a cake to try to save this guy's life. What I need it for? So therefore, to make it easier and uncomplicated, we made this rule. But what is he from here? What is he from here? That if he broke the Raidif himself, what is it? The Raidif himself has to pay. Sorry, the Raidif himself is potter. What do you call it? So we see from here that even though the Raidif is potter because it's Chai Misa, but he broke someone else's Kalim. Misa Lazeh, Mam Lazeh. The Raidif is Chai Misa because he was trying to kill Reuben. He breaks Levi's Kalim, and yet you tell me he's potter. Why is he potter? Because Kama V'Dravane. So that proves Misa Lazeh or Mam Lazeh is potter. That's what the Gemara says over here. Now, one issue is, first of all, before we get to that, what's the logic in yes or no? There's two ways of understanding Kama V'Dravane. There's a stricter punishment. Let's say you burn somebody's houses down on Shabbos. So you chayiv misa for the house and you owe some money for reimbursement. You don't have to pay it because Kama V'Dravane will give it a stricter punishment. There's two ways of understanding. One way of understanding is like we learned in Gemara before, the concept that if you get a stricter punishment, the lighter punishment is included in it as well. So therefore, it's as if you actually paid out that punishment, the monetary punishment. The other way of learning is that the Bezin doesn't have the capacity to penalize you or give you two penalties for one particular act. And the difference is as follows: if misa lazeh or mammon lazeh, if the point is that when this person gets misa, included in that is as if you also paid a monetary compensation. That only makes sense if both are directed towards one person. But if the misa is for one person and the mammon is for another person, then how can you say Kama D'Rabbanan? Because you got misa, how does that other person get anything from it? But if you learn that the point is, of course, you're chayiv. Mammon. Why you not chayiv mammon? But Bezin doesn't have the capacity to give you two punishments. then the same thing is misa lazeh or mama lazeh. Bezin still, it's one act. Bezin cannot give you two penalties. I don't care where it ends up, and therefore we will still say kama v'drabane. That's the two opinion. That's the question and the answer of the Gemara here. However, there's a question that everyone asks all the Rishonim, Taisus and Ksubas, that here Rabbi says clearly that misa lazeh or mama lazeh you are potter. Yet we learned in the early part of Sanhedrin, if you have two witnesses that come in and say that this girl was a Naira Marosa, was engaged, and she committed adultery. So the din is that the girl gets killed and she forfeits a ksubla, which would end up by her father, she forfeits. However, if these Eidim were found liars, then these Eidim Zaymin get, the Rabbi says there, it's the same Rabbi. You do get two punishments. And they'll get killed because they try to kill the Naira Marosa, but they also have to pay money because they were taking that money away from the father. Clearly, Misa Lazeh or Mama Lazeh, Rava holds that you punish two punishments. How do you reconcile these two Gemaras? So one view is that in all cases we say Misa Lazeh, Mama Lazeh is potter, exactly like the Gemara says here in Sanhedrin. But why by Ein Zayim Yechayiv? Because there the whole idea of Ein Zayim is every single punishment that they try to, every harm that they try to do to other people, we're going to give to them. And since they try to harm the girl and they try to harm the father, so it's a din in Eidim Zaymin that we will mete out justice to them, whatever they try to do. Therefore, they'll get both punishments. There's another view, the Rivam holds exactly the opposite. In all cases, that Misa Lazeh or Mama Lazeh, you're chayiv. You're always chayiv. But over here in Sanhedrin, you're potter. You know why? Because over here, this roidiv, Misa is to every single person. Every person, if they see him, has a right to kill him to defend the intended victim. So therefore, it's not Misa to one person, that Misa is only to the intended victim and Mama to the other person. You also owe, your life is also hefke for that other person. He has a Misa to kill you, he's around. So therefore, it's Misa and Mama to the same person. Yeah, so that's how we explain it. There is an interesting discussion. If Shimon is chasing Reuben and Levi is chasing Shimon, and Shimon is the pursuer, and if Shimon turns around and kills Levi, do we charge Shimon as if he killed it as a murderer? Or could Shimon say, well, I'm a relative to Reuben, but Levi is a relative to me, so I have a right to kill Reuben? Interesting discussion in its own right. Okay, back to the Gemara here. So now the Gemara starts off. So Gemara now will talk about a very interesting discussion that everybody's familiar with. There's certain mitzvahs that no matter what happens, you have to be prepared to give your life up for it. Tanya, and we said that we'll come back to soon. Shimon Yochai said, not only if somebody's about to murder somebody or somebody's about to rape somebody, but if somebody's also about to worship Avodah Zarah, also nitin latzil benafshi, go ahead and kill him. Why? We had a whole discussion in the Gemara. Why by Naira Marosa can you kill the rapist? Is it because it's really a case of murder? Because if she doesn't submit herself, he might end up killing her. So therefore, it's really like the trader says, it's like murder, and therefore we're protecting her life. Or is it to do with that? It's to do with the fact that this is a terrible pagam, a stain on her family, on herself, and her future husband, or her husband is engaged to, won't be interested in marrying her, and so on. So therefore, such a terrible pagam, we're defending her. There is actually an interesting chakira when we say that a roidif, after a nirdiv, we kill the roidif to protect it, and the nirdiv survives, is the purpose. Oh, we'll see in a minute. We'll come back to a minute. So thinking about it further. Uma pagam hedye. So he said, when you're staining an individual, you're allowed to kill this person to avoid the raping the Naimarasa, pagam kabaya, when you're insulting the Eibishter, Koshkan, surely. Says the Gemara, okay, let's say granted a good kavachaymer. Since when do we punish a kavachaymer? Says the Gemara, Kasava, we hold einshim minadin. Yes, we do punish a kavachaymer. Now, there's an interesting chakira. What's the idea of we kill the right of the pursuer? Is it to save the nerdif, if that's what it is? Or is it we're acting on behalf of the bezin and we are punishing, we are the executioner here for the bezin and we are punishing the raidif? Now, generally speaking, we'll say that it's not really a question of punishing the raidif, but rather we're protecting and saving the life of the nerdif. If that's the case, what's the Gemara's question? We don't punish somebody with kavachaymer because how do you know that the punishment is adequate, is the right punishment, so on and so forth. But if it's not a question of punishment, it's a question of saving the life of the nirdiv, where does kavachaymer come in there? Where does einshin come in at all? And if somebody is doing avodah zarah and we're going to kill him, we're saving him from doing an Avera. It's not a question of punishment. so they want to say that we had a machlekes if a child is a pursuer, do we kill the child or not? Between Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. We had it 2 days ago. So maybe that's the argument. If it's a punishment, you don't punish children. And that's why Rav Chizda says that you don't punish the pursuer. And we had a discussion about abortion. But the Rav Huna says you do kill the pursuer, even though the pursuer might be a child. Holds it's not a punishment. We are here to save the intended victim. Says the Gemara, son. Rabbi Lazar, he goes a step further. If you see someone's about to be Mechal Shabbos, you can kill him. So he shouldn't be Mechal Shabbos. How does he get that? He holds like his father, so he holds Avodah Zarah also. We will kill that person to prevent him from serving Avodah Zarah. And the Asi Shabbos, then you have this Gzei Shabbos, Chilul, because we know we compare somebody's Mechal Shabbos to Avodah Zarah, and that's why the wine is like Yayin Nesech and all that, and therefore, he says that if somebody's about to desecrate the Shabbos, you can kill him to stop him from it. They counted and they established Baaliyas base Nitza in the attic of the house of a person called Nitza, and some say that he was a Tana as well. Belud and Lud, Kol Avedas Shabbatayna, any Aveda in the Torah. They tell you, look, go ahead and eat treif, otherwise it will kill you. Is Yaver Vayar. There's no question they go ahead and do an Avera because it says in the Pasuk, V'chai Behem. The mitzvahs were given in order to live. Chutz ma'avodas kachavim, the Gila Arayas, Ushvichazam. The 3 exceptions. Avodah Zarah, Gila Arayas, immorality, and Ushvichazam, and murder. These are only 3 that you have no right to commit these Avedas, even under threat of life and death. We discussed the Taisus of Saita, actually Kiveger brings it here as well. We discussed it a few days ago, and that is that Tracy said there's the 4th thing: if you're embarrassing somebody, and it's like if you have to embarrass somebody, since it's like murder, you shouldn't be doing it. And he said it doesn't count it either because it's included in murder, or because we only count things which are clear in the Torah. Now the Gemara goes, you tell me avodas are not. But Tanya, we learned. Bishmal says. They tell somebody you better worship Avodah Zarah. He won't kill you. He argues. He says, "Go ahead and worship Avodah Zarah." But the mitzvah is given to you to live with. So therefore, all the mitzvahs are given for you to live with, and even Avodah Zarah. Not you should die on account of my mitzvahs. What about if it's done openly? Here we introduce another variable. This is a Chil Hashem in public. In the very same pasuk says that you should live with all the mitzvahs. You should live. It says in the pasuk. It says you should live with all the mitzvahs. That's one pasuk. But another pasuk says you shouldn't desecrate my name, and I want you to make a kiddush Hashem and a tashni b'deichin Yisrael. So therefore, we have a mitzvah of kiddush Hashem. That's the mitzvah of kiddush Hashem. Now. We'll come back to soon. So Peter Shmuel clearly says there's no such thing about Avodah Zarah. You should die for it. So we answer Inu the Amar. They hold like Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar says we're up to Ayin Dalet Amar Aleph, about 15 lines from the bottom of the page. So we are saying that we came out and we made a rule that Rabbi Yechon said 3 Averis under threat of life and death. You should still go ahead and be prepared to die for them. Avodah Zarah, Gila Arayas, Shvichas Damim. Now, if you didn't, you committed a sin, but the Bezin won't punish you for it. And then we said Rabbi Shmuel argues. There is a big argument in Rishonim. He argues regarding Avodah Zarah. What would Rabbi Shmuel hold regarding the other 2 Averis, Gila Arayas and Shvichas Damim? Would he also say the same thing? V'chai behem, you don't die for them. Or maybe he would agree that those 2 are different, as the Gemara will say there's a logic to it, and therefore maybe he would agree that those 2, maybe you should be prepared to die rather than be even Aver. So Rabbi said, "How to look at it says your whole nefesh, your whole life, of the whole being. Isn't that redundant? What's the difference between the 2? So we're going to say means with all your assets, means with your life. If you have people that they value their life more than their money. So the Torah says the ultimate, give away the ultimate, which is your entire life for Hashem. So in other words, There are certain avedas that you have to be prepared to die for rather than commit those sins. But if you have a person that their money is more beloved to them than the goof we had in Chulin of Tzaddik, the Yaakov Avinu went back for those little jugs because tzaddikim chavivim aleim emayim yesem gufim, they like their money more than they like their own life. Some of the Shem have a hard time getting their head around it. How can it be that a person likes his money more than his own life? Anyway, the Kachnem said the Chol Meidech. So clearly here we learn from B'Hafta Shokecha that there is a certain mitzvah that you have to be prepared to give your life. And we're talking right now about Avodah Zarah. So how do we know Gila Arayis Shvichas Damim? So that we learn from Rebbe. The Tanya we learned, Rebbe says, Kikashi Yakum Ishareyu. It says that when it talks about the Naira Hamorasa, and it says it's not her fault at all, she's innocent, and you have to help her out. So it says over there, and Kika is just like Kashi Yakum Ish Areyu. A person is about to jump and ambush his friend. Uritzachai, and murder him. Uritzachai never murdered. The same thing over here. Kain Hadavrazeh. Now, it sounds like we're trying to glean something from murder and learn from there to Naira Marasa. Says the Gemara, what are we deriving from the din of a Ritzech to teach us regarding a Naira Marasa? It came to teach, and instead, V'nim Tzalamed. He came what? V'nim Tzalamed, he learned. Makish Ritzech and Naira Marasa. He compares a Ritzech to a Naira Marasa. Ma Naira Marasa, just like a Naira Marasa. Nitin Latzila Benafshay. A Naira Marasa, you're allowed to kill the perpetrator. As it says, Ein Mashiach, there's no one to help her. But if there would be someone to help her, you're allowed to kill him. Is after Nitin Latzila Benafshay. So by murder, you can kill the pursuer and to save the intended victim. And then umakish naida hamarasa tzech. Now we compare naida hamarasa to a murder. When it comes to murder, you're told you better murder somebody. We say give up your own life and don't do it. After naida hamarasa tehareg va'al taber. So too the case in naida hamarasa, tehareg va'al taber. She should be prepared to die rather than to be over. So that's what we learn from each other. So we have now. I told you, and it's a and listen, murder itself. How do you know what? So you tell me, just like by a murder, you're supposed to be prepared to give your life. Same thing by Naira Rasa, but be prepared to give your life. Who told you by a murder you're supposed to be prepared to give your life? Savadu, it makes sense. Now, who doesn't come into Rabba? Somebody came for Rabba or Rabba. Amalei said to him, Amalei murderer, this master, the owner of my city said, Zil Katul upon you. Go ahead and kill that person. The Eli, and if not, Katlina Loch will kill you. So he went to Rabba or Rabba and he said, what am I supposed to do? Amalei Katluch, let them kill you. The lay sick tail, and you shouldn't be the murderer. Me yema, who told you the dama the dog sumik? Who told you that your blood is any redder? Dilma dama dahu gavra, maybe the blood of that person is sumik is redder than yours. Is redder than yours. So that's now. So this is the logic that we say that who said. What's the logic? So Rashi explains every Jewish neshama is precious. So killing either Jew is a big loss. However, if you're going to commit the murder, then in addition to losing a Jewish person, you're going to commit a sin. So therefore, that's worse than just having a Jewish person pass away. And the Rama adds that why is every Jewish person so treasured? Because people do mitzvahs. And if somebody's life passes away, if somebody passes away, there won't be any, that person won't be doing any more mitzvahs. Now, if that's the logic, then you'd wonder what happens if you're told, if two people are told, you better kill that person, otherwise you both are going to be killed. L'chayda, two people do more mitzvahs than one person, so maybe following that logic, they should kill that one person, so these two will survive. Following the logic. However, Chassidus says it's not the mitzvahs, it's the fact that they have a soul, and the neshama is part of Hashem, and everyone, there's only one Hashem, so all the Jewish people are really one and the same, we're all one, and therefore it's not a question of 1 versus 2 or 3 or 4, it doesn't matter how many mitzvahs you do, we don't say, oh, this person is younger and has many more mitzvahs to do, and this person is much older, and has much less mitzvahs to do. We don't do triage, because every yid is very, very precious. So there's a machlekes whether Rabbi Shmuel will agree to these two principles, to these two averas that you should die, or he holds in all three of them. It's machlekes in all the Rishonim and Avodah Zarah and in other places. So the Gemara continues. Well, so far we learned that Rabbi Shmuel does agree for sure. If it's in public, Chil Hashem, then you have to be prepared to die for it. So the Gemara continues. Avol b'shas sorry. Ki osar avdimi. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan came and said, "Lo yishana v'lo shlo b'shas gzeira malchus." This is talking about when it's not gzeiras hashmad. Avol b'shas gzeiras malchus. If there's a gzeira, a decree from the government that Jewish people should do something, I feel mitzvah kala yoriyava. Okay, what the mitzvah is, even a minig, you have to be prepared to die for. Gzeiras hashmad is if it's only towards aimed at the Jewish people, but if it's universal for everybody, or even let's say all religions have to stop, not just Jewish, then you have to be Moshe Nefesh. So only if it's Gzeiras Hashmad, it's directed at the Jewish people. What do you mean a light? What's a light mitzvah? Afilu even lishenuye to change arkasa de mesana, your shoes, even to change the shoelaces of the shoes. What's going on there? So Rashi says that the custom was that the Jewish people wore one color shoes and everyone else wore different color shoes. The Jewish people wore white shoes, like tap dancers, and the Goyim wore black shoes. So therefore, if they came along and said, "You better wear black shoes," and during Gzeiras Hashmad, you have to be prepared to die for it. Taisa says it's not the shoes; all the shoes are always black. It's the shoelaces. The Yidden wore white shoelaces, and the Goyim wore black shoelaces. Others say the reverse. Eden wore black shoelaces, Goyim wore white. The Rif says that Eden wore black shoelaces and Goyim wore red shoelaces. And red is a color of princess. We had in our brachas. Rabbi Barovin saw this woman walking dressed in red, and he went along and he pulled her dress off. Turned out to be she wasn't Jewish, and he had to then pay out a penalty, $200, as the Gemara says. So red is a color of promiscuity. You're trying to attract attention, and that's why the Eden didn't wear red. However, the Sheiltas has a very interesting pshat, radically different than everybody else. He says Arkas of the Mesana is like the seventh child of Chana, where the king said to the child, "Why don't you just bend down and pick up this ring so people will think that you're worshiping Avodah Zarah?" So Arkas of the Mesana means there's Avodah Zarah, the Eden don't want to bow down to it. So he said, "You know what? Go bend down right in front of Avodah Zarah to tie your shoe." So your intention is not to Avodah Zarah, but I want people to think that you guys are submitting yourself to Avodah Zarah. You have to be prepared to die for that. Which means, according to the Shiltas, a minig, like color, clothes you're wearing, wouldn't really apply. Again, that see the way the difference of the colors here is that colors, white, black, doesn't really make a difference. There's a machlek when we say don't follow the goyim, don't replicate the goyim. Is it across the board or only where there's a tinge of perhaps avodah zarah and all that? The Rif says that the Eden didn't wear red because red is princess. So there's a reason why we shouldn't follow the goyim, because it's not sneas. But what happens if they wore black and Eden wore white? According to the Rif, it's not a problem, because there's nothing wrong with Eden wearing black as well. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a question of sneers. It's not a question of avodah zarah. So there's no seichel chukasayim, like the Marik says. The Marik says there's no seichel chukasayim where it's not based on those two items. And others disagree. They say there's something a Yiddish minig and goyim do differently, even though there's nothing to do with avodah zarah or princess. You have to follow a Jewish way, which seems that's to be the machlekes here about the colors, whether it's red versus black or whether it's white versus black. Anyway, let's continue the Gemara. The Kamar V'Hesed, what's considered public? Amar Yaakov Amar Yechon, Ein V'Hesed Pacham Asar B'Yadam. V'Hesed means 10 people. 10 people. And Pshita Yisrael, not just 10 people, it has to be 10 Yidden. In order to be V'Hesed in public, that we say that you have to be prepared to die regarding what the mitzvah is. If they direct it again, they say it's a Chil Hashem, you have to be prepared to die. There is an argument whether the person who is being forced into it is part of the 10, or no, it's a Chil Hashem to himself as well. He's never forced into situations. Not, he's very reluctant, or he's not part of the 10. It has to be done in front of 10. Is a Pshita Yisrael, we need Jews. See what it says. It says, I want you to make a Kiddush Hashem amongst the Jewish people. Boy, not to let an opportunity go by, asks, Tisha Yisrael v'Nochri Echamau. You have 9 Yidden but 1 Goy. Is that considered a Chil Hashem? Toshma coming here. Rabbi Yanai, the brother of Chi Barabba, said, Asya, we learn out Toich. We learn out the word Toich. It says here in Ikdashti b'Toich b'nei Yisrael And it's linked to it says, he bodlu mitoich ha'eda zoy. Separate yourself from this community. Rashi says, by the Meraglim, that there were 12 Meraglim, but Yeshua and Caleb were with Moshe, and he was told to separate from the rest of the Meraglim, so there's 10. And that's how we know about a minion, and that's how we know for Hesi is 10 people. Very problematic, because this pasuk, he bodlu mitoich ha'eda zoy, is not written by the Meraglim. It's actually written by Korach. And by the Meraglim, there's no pasuk that says the word toich. So therefore, there's a pasuk missing here. The Rishalmi has another pasuk. There's a pasuk missing, and that is by Korach. It says he bodlu metoich ha'eda, and so we know from Mikdashti B'Tevin Yisrael, we learn from Korach that for Hesi is only there's an Eda, but we don't know what an Eda is, a community. And then we learn Eda from the Meraglim. By the Meraglim, it says Eda hara hazois, and there we know there were 10 people. So that's how we learn it out. So now when I ask a question, why Esther herself was the public knowledge. From here's that public doesn't mean that all 10 have to be standing there. Even if they're all aware of it, that's considered already public and Zechil Hashem. So Esther L'chayda, everyone knew. Now, in the Gemara Megillah, we have an argument whether Esther was a married woman or a single girl. It says there she was Bas Mordechai. So one opinion of the Gemara is Altikar Lebas Ela Lebayis. She's not the door, not a relative of Nisa Mordechai, but rather Lebayis Mordechai. She was married to Mordechai. Now, if she was married to Mordechai, she's an Eishes Ish. And if she's an Eishes Ish and she's committing adultery with Achashverosh in public, so why wasn't she stopped according to everybody? Now, the obvious question that all the Rishonim ask is, why doesn't the Gemara ask? I'll tell you a second. Omar Abaye answers, Esther karka olam hoisa. Abaye answers that Esther was karka olam, which means that she was passive. She wasn't proactive, and therefore she didn't have to. She didn't generate the Chil Hashem in that particular instance. So all the Rishonim ask, why are you introducing the idea of being public? Say better. There are 3 Avedas that one should be prepared to die for. One of them, Gila Arayis. She was a married woman. So the simple answer is that this Gemara's question goes according to the opinion. She was not a married woman. She was single. Or another simple answer would be is the Gemara is asking a question that would even be a challenge to Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel doesn't agree perhaps on the 3 Avedas one should be prepared to die, but at least Chil Hashem. But as a result of this question, the Rabbein Tam comes up with an unbelievable chiddush. Rabbein Tam wants to say that the Gemara didn't ask a question about Gila Arayis because a married Yiddish woman who has an affair with a goy is not called Gila Arayis, and she can live with her husband. Because it says in the pasuk that Zirmas Susim Zirmasam. We learn out from there that a goyish father doesn't have any yichus with his children. So he says over there that if a married woman commits adultery with a goy, she's not asa to her husband. Then he goes further. If later we know that din is a married woman has an affair, then even if her husband divorces her, she can never live with that other person as well. Echad lebal ve'echad leboil. So Rabbein Tam says that if this guy converts and becomes a yid, she can live with him because he's not considered boil. Others agree with Rabbein Tam, but for different reasons. They say that a ger who converts is kikatan shenel dami, he's like a brand new person, has no family, and therefore the person who had an affair with her is no longer around. This is a new person, and therefore they can't. That's Rabbein Tam's view. His brother, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Meir, the Rivam, his older brother, completely argues with him, completely. And one of the proofs that he brings is Esther said to Mordechai in the Megillah, she said, okay, I'm going to go to Achashverosh willingly and try to become nice to him again so I can curry his favor. And she used the words, V'kasher avadati avadati. I'm lost. Now that I was lost, I'm lost. I'm lost to you. I've lost my Olam Haba because I'm lost to you. I can no longer live with you. In other words, now that until now I was forced into it, but now that I'm going to go willingly to live with Achashverosh, I can no longer live with you. Clearly, that a goy, even though Achashverosh is a goy, makes her asa to her husband. Anyway, so the Rivam wants to learn. The reason is because we already understood that if she's passive in these 3 things, Gila Reis, you don't have to. She won't have to die. Just like by Retzicha. In a case, they tell you better murder that person or God will kill you. Of course you don't. What happens? They say stand still, and they're going to pick him up and throw him on this young child and basically kill this child. Do you have to be Ma'aseh Nefesh then? Everyone says no. because you're not doing anything, you're just passive. So therefore, we already knew the idea that if you're passive, you don't have to die. But when it comes to Chil Hashem, maybe even when you're passive, you have to be ready to die for it. And the Gemara answers, even so, you don't have to die for that. And there's a big so when we said before the Gemara, the Naira Marasa Ye'aver Al Tehareg, there are two versions of the Gemara. Some say the Al Tehareg, and some say the Al Yehareg. Some say that Tehareg means Tehareg Al Yaver is or Yareg Al Yaver. Tehareg Al Yaver includes the woman. That the woman also has to be prepared, be prepared to die, which means that maybe even either she's passive, or sometimes if she gets more involved, she's not so passive. Or do we say Yaharig Ba'al Yaber, and the woman never has to die for it because she's always considered Karka Olam? Because even if she's not active or just passive, they can force themselves on her anyway. It makes no difference. And there is an argument amongst the Rishonim. All other Avedas, if a person wants to be machmer and be prepared to die, is that a noble thing? Is that abhorred? What's the story there? So some people, the Rambam says you're not allowed to. The Ramban. Others say that it's actually a noble thing. You were prepared to be mitzvah nefesh for any mitzvah. And the third party says, based on Sefer Chassidim, that only if you're a tzaddik or a chassid, then you have to be prepared to give your life up even for other mitzvahs. We're talking about where there's no chil Hashem or there's no gzeir shmad, but everybody else shouldn't. Then there's a whole interesting argument in the Poskim, in the Rishonim. Are you allowed to commit suicide to avoid doing an Avera? Which is a similar thing that we're talking about right now. And one of the proofs that they bring that you're allowed to is those cases, remember those boys and girls were on the ship and they all jumped off. Remember getting there in the story of the Chor Beis HaMikdash, they all jumped and committed suicide. The girls jumped first and the boys said, if they can, surely we should. If you don't think that you're strong enough to hold back. Rabbi Chananya Mitrad and those who hold that you're not allowed to, I mean the other proofs as well, and those who hold that you're not allowed to bring a proof from Rabbi Zorah, Chananya Mitrad, when they caught him giving shiurim and they were burning him, and the terrible fire, and they took the parchment of the Torah and wrapped around him, and the Talmidim, and he refused to open his mouth to let the fire come in quickly so that he can burn faster. He didn't want to in any way participate in ending his life sooner. Anyway, the Gemara continues. Rava comes along and says, not that necessarily disagrees with Abaye, but he says, Anos Atzman Shiny. If they're trying to drive you away from religion is one thing. Here, Achashverosh is not trying to drive you away from religion. He wanted Esther as a wife. So in that case, you don't have to be Moshe Nefesh. Big Machlek is a Sheni Balamor and the Ramban and others. What about in the three Averas that one is supposed to die for? What happens if their purpose is not to what about Avodah Zarah? Where the purpose of Avodah Zarah, let's say, is not because he wants you to do whatever it is, but I'm not asking for their own benefit. Do you still have to be Moshe Nefesh or not? So from the following story, the way Rashi learns, it's pretty clear what he says. He says the not that hani kvaki. These were copper utensils. On their day, their holiday, in their church, they make a big thing there. They want to go to every Jewish house. They collect coal in these pots and they warm up the place. How can you participate in that? They're not doing it because they want to drive you away from the religion. They just do it because they want it to be warm and nice when they worship their idols. So from the way we're learning right now the Gemara, it seems that even Avodah Zarah, if it's Anos Atzman, you don't have to die for it. But also Rava Tamei, Rava. Akum Damalaisov, a guy says to eat. I want you to cut down this grass on Shabbos. The Shadi L'Chayusa. And I want you then to toss it to the animals as fodder. If not, I'll kill you. The din is cut the grass, because in this case, he's not trying to drive you away from religion. He just wants someone to cut down his grass over there, so therefore he's doing it for his own benefit. But if he tells the guy, Shadi Lenara, he tells him, I want you to throw it into the river. Then leak to lay, but lay leak to. If he tells him, I want you to throw it in the river, then you should let yourself be killed and not cut it down. Because he's doing it to drive it. He has no benefit, so why is he doing it? To make you Mechal Shabbos, then you're allowed to. My time Lavudi Musika boy, doing it to Mechal Shabbos. So we're talking about over here is either Gzeir Shmad or in public. Boy, Yemenei. Is there a mitzvah for a guy to the Kiddush Hashem or not. There's a mitzvah Kiddush Hashem by Yidden. It's a Dashti b'Torah b'nei Yisrael. In fact, there's many who say they have to make a bracha, and there's a discussion what the bracha is. But the question is, do Goyim have the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem? Now we have a mitzvah Kiddush Hashem because we need to counter the other pasuk where it says v'chai behem, that mitzvahs are given to live. So how do you know you're supposed to give up your life for anything? So we have a pasuk v'nikdashti b'Seichei Yisrael. What about a goy? The Gemara I'm going to buy a seven mitzvahs. There's seven mitzvahs from the Noach. If there's a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, then tam nahavna. There's 8 mitzvahs. That isn't a proof at all, because when these 7 mitzvahs you have to also do all the ancillaries and anything associated with it. And Kiddush Hashem is a continuation of any one of those mitzvahs. So therefore, it's included in those 7. So my Havila, bottom line, what's the story? It says in the pasuk when Elisha then saved Naaman from his tzaras, and he told him he should give up Avodah Zarah. So Naaman said to him, "Look, I have a problem. I want you to forgive me for the following, because I'm going to go to the emperor. But when we go to the church, and he's going to go and bow down, worship here, and he leans on me. So I have no choice. I have to bow down with him. And I'm going to bow down. Am I allowed to or not? And this is public. And it says over there, Leich l'shalom, go in peace. Now go in peace, he said. Now, if you can tell me that a Ben Noach has also the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, how can Elisha say, Leich l'shalom, you're doing the right thing? Okay, you don't have to admonish him or reprimand him because it says es amisecha, only a friend. Now, when it comes to, let's say, a goy who took on not to serve a ger toishev, but nevertheless, don't say leich l'shalom. It's tell him something which is not true because he's doing the wrong thing. Says the Gemara, he says here, when do we say that the Kiddush Hashem may be by a goy when it's in public? Kiddush Hashem. In public in front of 10 Yidden. As Rashi says, it has to be 10 Yidden. But over here it was in the church, there was no Yidden there, it was only goyim there, it was very discreet. That's how, so no, Rashi learns there's no conclusion in the Gemara, which Tosfos finds very difficult because the expression, my have Allah is an expression you always use whenever you come to a conclusion. So therefore, what's pshat over here? So therefore he says, that he takes out the word loy, and he says that the Gemara says here he should have just said to him that he should have told Naaman, okay, you want to go ahead and do it, no problem, but do it discreetly, don't do it publicly. Why didn't he say that? He just said leich l'shalom. He's a raya. There's no mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem by a goy. Take one further. Look, first finish a payment. Just a story. The story of the person he fell, he was besotted by this woman, the hela libatina, and he just fell in love, and he was going crazy, and he started getting sick. They went to the doctors to say the guy needs help. There is no remedy here until he gives in to his passion. And she gives into his passion. He went to the rest of the Rabbanim. Chachamim said, Yamus v'al tibole. No way are we going to allow her to have any relations with him. Let at least stand naked in front of her so that he should recover, for he's dying. Yamus v'al let him die. She should not stand before him naked. Why can't she just talk to him behind the fence to sort of give him some soothing words, and now maybe he'll recover? No, let him die and not talk from behind the fence. What actually happened is an argument. She's a married woman, therefore it was wrong to allow any of these things. She's a single girl. So you were asked, she's a married woman. I understand why the Chum refused to allow anything, no allowances, to save this person's life. And it's like an extension of Arayis. She was a single girl. My cool height to this extent to let this guy die? Papa said, because it's not just affecting her, it's affecting her entire family. And therefore, we have no right to impose on the family because he decided to fall in love with her and now he's dying. It's not their responsibility. We don't want to allow this whole promiscuity, debauchery, and all that. We're not going to allow that. So the Gemara asks, the lints of Minson. Why? So forget about being prutz of arois. Let's encourage her to marry him so that he can come back to life. If she agrees. Says the Gemara, it wouldn't, it's not a remedy. You know why? Like we had the Gemara end in the door. Rabbi Yitzchak said, when the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, nitla tam bia, the pleasure of bia was taken away from all innocent people, and v'nitna la'over avera, and given their very nose, people are so worried about being in Golos and exile, they don't really enjoy Gashmis the way it should be. But over avera enjoyed all the time. So now it says, Mayim gnuvim yimtaku, that stolen water is sweet, and it says v'lechem stadim, that what the bread of hidden bread, which is a euphemism for her having relations, is very sweet. So if they marry properly, it takes out all the fun. If you remember, we had a Rashi in the Flamet Aleph on the base, where Rashi tells half a story, and in fact, that half a story and this half a story tells us the whole story. Who is this person? What's going on here? Rashi tells us that he saw in the Haggadah and I'm just putting two together to tell you the full story. So here we see the guy was totally taken by this woman, and he very, very sick, and he was dying. And what happened at the end? Doesn't tell us. Rashi did tell us the medrash. There's a man called Nosson Tzutzitza. Rashi said that this person there was she was a married woman, and he was totally beside about her, and he couldn't get it out of her head. So then one day she was desperate for a loan, and he was a rich man. So he sent her a message: "You want a loan? Come to my house." And she knew exactly why she was going to the house, and she's prepared to submit herself, even though she's a married woman, because they were desperate for money. She was desperate for money, so she went to his house, and now he was a very sick man, and this was going to be his only remedy. And just as he was about to go ahead and commit a sin with her, he restrained himself and held himself back. And he did not have any relations whatsoever. He was cured, and this halo was around his head, and he was called from then on in Nosson Tzutzitza. He became a big Baal Tshuva and a big Tana, and became Nosson Tzutzitza. So put two together, that's the full story.